What happens aback one of Hollywood's best admired legends sits above from television's best annoying host, and actually aggregate goes wrong. You won't accept what unfolds aback Robert De Niro accomplish into Bill Maher's area and refuses to ball. By the rules, this isn't your archetypal celebrity interview. This is a masterclass in how ego, politics, and raw affect can backfire into television gold that had admirers alert to their screens and amusing media active oral minutes. Before we get into this absurd story, accomplish abiding, you hit that subscribe button and bead a animod version below, because you're not activity to accept. What unfolds aback these two titans affray in what can alone be declared as one of the best atomic confrontations in a stern night television history? The restriction was apparent from the moment Robert De Niro absolved to simulate the set of Absolute Time with Bill Maher. The allegorical amateur accepted for his abstinent, accessible appearances and careful interviews had agreed to arise on the appearance to altercate his latest blur projects and conceivably draft on some accepted events. What Cypher accepted was that this acutely accepted celebrity account would circling into a battle that would accept admirers' acrimonious abandon. An analytic aggregate the anticipation they knew about both men. Bill Maher, anytime the seemed decidedly activated that evening, his aperture address had already pushed several boundaries, affecting unarguable political capacity with his signature alloy of smugness and declared intellectualism. The admirers was broiled up, assured the accepted Maher blueprint of anxious annotation alloyed with celebrity banter. But as De Niro acclimatized into the bedfellow chair, article in the air, acquainted, different. The account began innocuously abundant, with Maher authoritative as archetypal jokes about Hollywood and allurement De Niro about his accessible projects. The actor, dressed in his characteristic chaste style, answered with his accepted gravitas, discussing his ability with the account it deserved, but Maher, conceivably analysis and befalling to actualize a viral moment, began counsel, the chat adjoin added advancing territory. "You know," Bob Maher said with that acclimatized smirk, "you've been appealing bright about backroom lately. Some bodies or adage actors should stick to acting. What do you anticipate about that?" De Niro's announcement, confused slightly, about apparent abbreviating about his eyes, that anyone acclimatized with his assignment would admit as a admonishing sign. "I anticipate bodies accept a appropriate to allege their minds. Bill, that's what capitalism is about." Sure, Maher replied, aptitude aback in his armchair with an air of superiority. "But don't you anticipate there's article a little affluent about millionaire actors lecturing approved Americans about their problems? I mean, when's the aftermost time you're afraid about advantageous rent?" The admirers confused uncomfortably as De Niro's jaw clenched. This wasn't the antic badinage they were acclimated to seeing on the show. This acquainted, different, added personal, added pointed. Maher seemed to be advisedly dabbling at article deeper. "I grew up in Little Italy," De Niro responded, his articulation maintaining its appropriate calm, but with an bend bit by bit in. "I apperceive what it's like to struggle. Aloof, because I've been acknowledged, doesn't beggarly I've alone area. Came from or the decant affliction about added people." Maher chuckled dismissively. A complete death seemed to brand adjoined De Niro's composure. "Appear on, that was like 60 years ago. You've been active in penthouses and aerial clandestine jets for decades. Don't you anticipate your ability be a little out of touch?" The actors easily absorbed the armrests of his armchair added tightly. "You appetite to allocution about actuality out of touch. You sit actuality every anniversary, authoritative jokes about austere issues, alleviative aggregate like it's entertainment. Absolute bodies are adversity out there. Hayball is how we action difficult topics." Marsh advanced back, his accent acceptable, added defensive. "At Atomic, I'm honest about what I do. I don't pretend to be some moral ascendancy because I can acquire, curve, and attending boxy on screen." The blackout that followed was deafening. The flat audience, borderline whether this was scripted battle or 18-karat animosity, sat frozen. De Niro stared at Maher with an acuteness that had abashed endless actors and admiral over the years, but the allocution appearance host seemed absent. To the force of what he had aloof said, "You apperceive what your botheration is, Bill." De Niro assuredly spoke, his articulation low and controlled in a way that somehow fabricated it, added alarming than if he had shouted. You anticipate actuality, contemptuous, makes you smart. You anticipate disturbing bodies, bottomward, makes you clever. But all it actually makes you is small. Maher's face ablaze slightly, his accepted aplomb clashing for aloof. A moment before he attempted to achieve ascendancy of the situation. Look, Bob, I account your work. I actually do. But this able, angelic animus affair, you've got activity on. It's accepting a little old, don't you think? The airs in Maher's articulation was unmistakable. An article into Niro Unc's announcement. Confused again, the abstinent ascendancy that had accurate his accessible persona for decades began to crack. Absolute article, raw and affronted underneath. Getting old, Niro repeated, his articulation assent slightly. You appetite to apperceive what's accepting old, watching bodies like you about-face aggregate into a punchline. There are absolute after-effects to the things you antic about. Absolute bodies accepting hurt. Maher seemed to apprehend he had pushed too far, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. Instead, he angled bottomward with the affectionate of airs that had fabricated him both acclaimed and reviled. Oh, additional me the lecture. Bob, you Hollywood liberals are all the same. You alive in your balloon and anticipate you accept. The absolute world. The words afraid in the air like a challenge, and anybody in that flat could faculty that article was about to explode. Niro Unc's eyes narrowed to slits, his absolute anatomy beaming the affectionate of controlled acerbity that had fabricated him allegorical in roles like Travis Bickle and Jake LaMotta. The admirers captivated its aggregate breadth. Analysis they were about to attest an article unprecedented. But what happened to budding would beat alike their wildest expectations, as this war of words was about to amplify into article far added atomic than anyone could accept imagined. The blackout connected for what acquainted like an Ian Aphrodiro leaned advanced in his chair. His articulation bottomward to a buzz that somehow agitated added annoyance than any bark could accept, managed. You apperceive what, Bill? I've been accomplishing this for over 50 years. I've formed with the best directors, the greatest actors, and I've never not already encountered addition as fundamentally Alice as you are appropriate now. Maher's advance at a dismissive beam came out as added of a afraid chuckle. Appear on, Bob. Don't be so dramatic. This is aloof, a chat amid two guys who disagree. Aloof, a conversation. Niro Unc's articulation, absurd like a whip. You arrive me. Actuality to allocution about my work, my life. And instead, you're sitting there like some affectionate of judge, absolution, aggregate, I've said. Aggregate I accept in E. You anticipate this is entertainment. The camera operators were accepting a field. They zooming in on both men's faces as the restriction ratcheted up to enough levels, conceivably analogous. He was accident ascendancy of his own show, approved to beacon things aback to safer ground. But it was already too late. The accident was done, and Niro was aloof, accepting started. You appetite to allocution about actuality, out of touch. Niro continued his easily now gesturing emphatically. You sit abaft this board every week, adequate by your writers and your producers. Demography bargain shots at bodies who can't action back. That's not comedy, Bill, that's cowardice. The admirers gasped audibly at this absolute advance on Maher's character. This wasn't the antic battle they were acclimatized to seeing on a stern night television. This was personal, visceral, and actually unscripted. Maher's face went through a alternation of expressions, shock, anger, and article that ability except in fear. Now delay aloof a minute, Maher said, his articulation assent to bout den Niro Unc's intensity. I've been accomplishing this appearance for over 20 years. I've taken on politicians, corporations, religious leaders, bodies a lot added able than some amateur accepting an atmosphere tantrum. The chat acrimony seemed to hit Niro like a concrete blow, his absolute address, confused, and for a moment, admirers could see the artery kid from Little Italy that existed below the Hollywood legend. Tantrum, he repeated, his articulation alarmingly quiet. You anticipate this is a tantrum. I anticipate you're overreacting to some accepted questions, Ma replied, his his accent aloof in a way that fabricated the bearings always worse. Maybe. You should booty abysmal animation and bethink area you are. That was the moment aggregate changed. Niro stood up from his armchair with such abrupt force that it formed a stern several feet. The admirers collectively inhaled, and several bodies in the advance row visibly the actors abounding acme and attendants abounding the anatomy as he stared bottomward at Maher back. Looked actual baby abaft his desk, bethink area I am. Niro Unk's articulation was now actually unleashed. All pretense of amenity abandoned. I'm in a flat with a man who thinks he's smarter than anybody else, who hides abaft jokes aback. He gets alleged out, who treats his guests like backdrop in his little ball show. Maher, acutely rattled, but aggravating to advance some affinity of control, gestured abominably adjoin Niro Unk's chair. Sit down. Let's aloof, calm bottomward, and dash. Don't you cartel acquaint me to calm down, Niro. Cut him off. His articulation alveolate through the studio. You've been Alice from the moment I absolved out here. You've questioned my intelligence, my background, my appropriate to accept opinions, and now you appetite me to calm down. The assembly agents was in chaos. Cameras were aimlessly adjusting to abduction the battle from every angle, while producers, off-camera, were aimlessly whispering into their headsets. This was either activity to be the best talked-about moment in the show's history, or a complete adversity that would charge to be heavily edited afore broadcast. Ma, conceivably, acumen the force of the situation, attempted one after most time. To achieve control, look, Bob, I anticipate there's been a confounding here. This is how the appearance works. We accept active debates, we claim an anniversary others' ideas. It's annihilation, personal, annihilation, personal. Niro's beam was absinthian and harsh. You've fabricated it claimed from the aboriginal question. You've attacked my character, my motivations, my absolute life's work, and afresh you accept the adventurousness to sit there and acquaint me it's annihilation. Personal, the amateur began pacing abaft his chair, his movements aciculate and agitated. Every actuality in that flat could feel the acerbity, beaming from him like calefaction from a furnace. This wasn't acting. This was raw, unfiltered animal effect on affectation in a way that Cypher had accepted to see. Ma, his accepted complacent aplomb, actually evaporated, approved one, added time to deliver the situation. Bob, I anticipate maybe we should booty a bartering breach and dash. No, Niro snapped addled, about to face him. No bartering break. No time out. You capital to accept this conversation, Bill. So, let's accept it appropriate here. Appropriate now. The restriction in the flat was so thick it was about suffocating. Admirers' associates were attractive about nervously, borderline whether they should break or leave. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every additional of what was rapidly acceptable, one of the best atomic moments in television history. You apperceive what your absolute botheration is, Niro continued, his articulation now accustomed the abounding weight of his decades of acquaintance and success. You're not bisected as acute as you anticipate you are, and you're alert, as atrocious, as you charge to be. You've congenital your absolute career on disturbing added bodies down, and you anticipate that makes you some affectionate of truth-teller. Maher opened his aperture to respond, but Niro wasn't finished. The floodgates had opened, and years of annoyance with the media, with cynicism, with bodies who advised austere issues as punchlines came cloudburst out. I've spent my absolute career aggravating to a quaint belief that matter, alive with bodies, who affliction about their craft, who account the process, and a fresh eye appear actuality, and get advised like some affectionate of dancing monkey, by addition who wouldn't, after most 5 account accomplishing what I do, the claimed attributes of the advance acutely stung Ma, who assuredly activate his articulation again. That's affluent advancing from addition, who pretends to be added bodies for a living. At atomic, I'm honest about who I am. This acknowledgement accepted to be the final straw, and what happened abutting would advance their battle above the point of no acknowledgement into area that neither man could appear aback from Niro Unk. S-face went through a transformation that was both alarming and anesthetic to witness. The controlled acerbity that had been alive below the apparent assuredly erupted in all its adverse glory. His eyes blazed with an acuteness that fabricated his best memorable blur performances, anemic in comparison. Because this wasn't acting, this was the absolute Robert De Niro bear of all Hollywood pretense and media training. Pretends to be, added people. De Niro's articulation was now a barrage that abounding every bend of the studio. You anticipate what I do is pretending. You arrogant, affected allotment of garbage. I've spent 50 years perfecting my craft, belief, animal nature, compassionate whatted agency to be real. And you sit abaft this bored authoritative jokes about things you don't understand. Bodies you've never met, situations you've never experienced. The admirers was actually bashful now. Some bodies accoutrement, their mouths in shock. Others, affairs out their phones to almanac what was acutely activity to be allegorical television. Maher sat Arctica baft his desk. His accepted quick wit actually alone him as he faced the abounding force of Niro Unk's wrath. At Atomic Aback, I actualize a character. I do it with respect, with research, with dedication. Niro continued. Now pointing a non at Ma, you actualize this appearance of yourself, this declared intellectual, this truth-teller, and it's the phoniest achievement I've any time seen. You're not honest, Bill. You're a artifice, ambuscade, a baft, a board, and a beam track. Maher assuredly activate his voice, but it came out anemic and defensive. Bob, you're way out of band here. This is my show. And I don't accept a sit actuality and booty this affectionate of corruption from anyone, including you. Your show, Niro laughed, but it was a complete bear of any humor. This isn't a show, Bill. This is a circus, and you're the clown, and I'm done actuality allotment of your act. The amateur angry as if to leave, but a fresh aerated aback around is field jabbing in Maher's direction. You apperceive what the aberration is amid you and me. A back eyeball, a character the admirers knows. I'm acting. A back you ball yourself. You're so affected that cipher can acquaint what's absolute anymore. Maher's face was now ablaze, red with acrimony and embarrassment. Actuality dressed bottomward on his own appearance in advance of his own admirers by one of the best admired actors in Hollywood was acutely added than his ego could handle. You appetite to allocution about fake you've been benumbed on the aforementioned boxy guy persona for decades. Travis Bickle, Jake LaMotta, it's all the aforementioned appearance with altered clothes. This advance on his anatomy of assignment was actually the amiss affair to say. Niro Unk's absolute anatomy tensed like a coiled spring, and aback he batten again. His articulation agitated the weight of every role he'd any time inhabited, every affect he'd any time channeled, every accuracy he'd any time approved to accompany to the screen. You accept no abstraction what you're talking about, he said. Anniversary chat actually delivered like bullets from a gun. Those characters, every distinct one of them, came from article real. They came from observation, from empathy, from compassionate the animal condition. What do your jokes appear from, Bill? What do your opinions appear from? Spite, jealousy, the charge to feel above to anybody else. The assembly agents was in complete agitation mode. Now, this had gone so far above annihilation that could be salvaged with alteration that several bodies were above board, discussing whether they should cut the cameras entirely. But the footage was too compelling to raw, too aberrant to stop recording. Ma, his accord actually shattered, fabricated one final atrocious advance to achieve some control. You anticipate you're bigger than me because you're in movies, because you've got awards. Well, let me acquaint you something, Bob. I've been speaking accuracy to ability while you've been arena dress-up. The blackout that followed was deafening. Niro stared at Maher with such concentrated antipathy that several admirers' associates actually confused in their seats. Activity the ache beaming above the absolute studio. Aback, he assuredly spoke. His articulation was quiet again, but now it agitated a certitude that anybody could recognize. Accuracy to power. Niro afresh, slowly. You wouldn't admit accuracy if it absolved up an alien itself. You're not speaking to power, Bill. You are the power. Your allotment of the apparatus that turns aggregate into ball, that reduces absolute animal adversity into punchlines for your admirers to beam at. He began walking adjoined the bend of the stage, but he wasn't done yet. Turning aback one added time, he delivered what would become the best quoted curve from the absolute confrontation. I came actuality tonight, cerebration. I was activity to accept a chat with a professional. Instead, I acquisition myself crumbling time with a yebs. Little man who's assertive himself that acrimony is acumen, and animality is comedy. His articulation rose again. Architecture to a acme that would be replayed endless times above amusing media. You appetite to apperceive what's real, Bill. This is real. This anger, this disgust, this complete abridgment of account, I accept. For what you do and who you are. That's the realest affair that's happened on this appearance in years. Ma, now atrocious and acquisitive for any way to deliver his dignity, stood up from abaft his desk. You can't allocution to me like this. This is my show, my studio, and I won't be disrespected by some has-been amateur who can't handle a little criticism. The words has been seemed to answer through the flat like a gunshot. Niro chockfull, asleep in his tracks, boring, angry around, and for a moment, anybody in that allowance, anticipation they were about to attest an article that would end up on the evening, account for all the Amos reasons. But instead of concrete violence, Niro delivered article far, added devastating his voice, aback it came, was controlled again, but abounding with such bane antipathy that it was arguably added annihilative. Then any bite could accept been. Has been, he afresh about wonderingly. I'm 79 years old and I'm still working, still creating, still blame myself to acquisition new truths in my work. What are you activity to be accomplishing, aback your my? Age Bill? Still sitting abaft, this bored authoritative, the aforementioned annoyed, jokes about the aforementioned annoyed capacity to an admirers that's accepting a bait every year. He paused, absolution that bore in afore, carrying the final blow. You alarm? Me has been, but at atomic I was article to activate with. Ura never was aggravating to breach bottomward bodies, who actually able article with their lives. Maher's face went white, a fresh red, a fresh white again. The abasement was absolute and complete. Advertisement, alive to millions of admirers, and actuality recorded by dozens of phones in the audience. In a aftermost atrocious advance to accept the final word, he shouted above the studio. Get out. Aloof. Get the hell out of here. Security Niro smiled for the aboriginal time all evening, but it wasn't an affable expression. Don't worry, Bill. I wouldn't break in this abode additional if you paid me. He looked on into the camera. Acclamation, the admirers at home. Folks, you deserve bigger than this. You deserve hosts who account their guests, who appoint with account, instead of advancing people who accept that absolute chat requires absolute respect. As he absolved a joint, the exit, Mark couldn't advise himself from accepting in one aftermost shot. Yeah, well, go yourself, Bob. Niro stopped, angry about one final time, and delivered the band that would become legendary. Go yourself, no Bill. Go yourself, and aback. You're done with that booty. A continued attending in the mirror, and ask yourself what happened to whatever appropriateness you ability accept had already aloft a time. With that, Robert Niro absolved off the set of absolute time with Bill Maher. Abrogation, abaft, a abashed audience, a ashamed host, and a moment in television history that would be talked about for years to come. The cameras kept rolling as Maher sat abaft his desk, visibly shaken, clumsy to acquisition words to ample the asleep air that followed. Niro unk es exit. The battle was over, but its pulse was aloof beginning. Amusing media exploded oral account with clips of the altercation. Overextension, faster than wildfire. The raw actuality of Niro's acrimony, accumulated with his bright dismantling of Maher's persona, resonated with admirers who had developed annoyed of the host's more contemptuous access to political and amusing annotation as the flat lights dimmed, and the admirers filed out in abashed silence. One affair was abundantly clear. This wasn't aloof, a celebrity account gone wrong. This was a masterclass in how absolute affect and 18-karat confidence could cut. Through years of media brightness and bogus altercation to acknowledge article actually authentic, Robert Niro had reminded anybody what it looked like. A back edition banned to ball the game, banned to be diminished, and banned to let boldness. accelerate in the name of entertainment. The allegorical amateur had absolved into that flat as a bedfellow and absolved out as article abroad entirely. A man who had fatigued a band in the beach and dedicated it with aggregate